Hi, this is Chris Bennett, Vice President of Marketing here at Tintri, and with me I have Pratik Water, Vice President of Engineering. And what we want to do in this short video is give you an overview of Tintri VMstore. So Pratik, why don't you show us what it's like as a VMware administrator to use this exciting new product?
Sure, Chris. So first of all, what you're looking at here is a Windows VM. This is my desktop VM that's running on a Tintri appliance. And you're looking at the VMware vSphere client. This is the application that most VMware administrators, that's what they use on a day-to-day basis to monitor their VMs and essentially provision VMs. And so this is their tool. And we're going to look at the data stores on this particular vCenter. So what you can see here is on the left-hand side, you see a list of the data stores that are currently being managed by this instance of vCenter. The Tintri 10G appliance that you see here is one of our internal production machines. It's a Tintri data store. As you can see, it appears as a NAS NFS mounted data store with a total capacity of about 8.5 terabytes or 8 terabytes in decimal. The total logical size of the VMs that are provisioned on this data store is about 10.3 terabytes. So that's a direct result of thin provisioning, where the logical size is greater than the actual physical size available. So again, nothing magical there. It's just
There's nothing out of the ordinary here
right.
except that you've got over 8 terabytes in a single data store.
So now if you are a VMware administrator and you wanted to drill down into the data store, say you wanted to provision more VMs, or you were troubleshooting a VM. You wanted to figure out in a particular application or a VM that was not behaving or operating as it normally did. Then there's two ways of doing this. You can click on the Tintri tab here, or you can come to this dashboard via a regular web browser too. And what you're presented with is the Tintri dashboard, which comprises three sections. The top section here shows you how your data store is doing overall, and is displaying four key metrics: IOPS, throughput, latency, and the flash hit ratio, where the flash hit ratio is as a measure of how much of your VMs IOs are being serviced out of flash versus disk. The bottom section displays two fuel gauges, and it gives you a measure of the headroom available on your appliance. So the bottom fuel gauge is pretty ordinary. This is what you would see on any traditional or legacy storage array. It's showing you the amount of space that's written to the array and the amount of space available. So nothing special there. The top fuel gauge is unique to Tintri. It is essentially showing you how much performance headroom is available on your system or on this particular data store. This is unique to Tintri. It's where some of our core algorithmic magic happens. And what we do is look at a VM over a multi-hour window and look at the several things. We look at, for example, the working set of the VM. We'll look at the flash usage, disk usage, memory, CPU usage, a lot of other things to arrive at a measure of how much performance reserves it needs.
We actually track that per vDisk for every vDisk that is in the data store.
Bottom line being, right, if you are a VM administrator, you came in here and you saw green on your performance fuel gauge and a green on your space fuel gauge, then you are okay to add more VMs to this particular data store.
So it's really, really simple to answer the question, can I put more VMs on this data store?
Now, one other thing to point out, we noted earlier that we had about 10.3 terabytes of logical size. That's the logical size of the VMs that were provisioned on this data store. We have actually written about 6 terabytes here to the data store. But as you can note, 100% of your IOs are being serviced out of flash. Now, we have about a terabyte of flash on our system. So you have about 6 terabytes of VMs, and 100% of the IOs are being serviced out of 1 terabyte of flash. The reason we do that and the way in which we do that, one, a measure of the way we come up with the performance reserves that are used by that VM. But secondly, we also use inline dedupe and compression to increase the size of flash.
The effective size.
Yeah, the effective size of flash.
And we often see, I know from talking to customers, we often see a factor of 4 or 5 in terms of how much logical space appears to be consumed in flash as opposed to how much physical space.
So one other thing quickly is each of these areas are pretty live. So if you were to click on any of these sections, you get presented with a graphical view of that particular metric. In this case, you're looking at the IOPS for the entire data store. If you click on a particular data point, what you'll see is the VM that actually contributed the most to that particular data point. On the right-hand side, you'll see a list of the top contributors. So in this case, you're seeing the TT3 Win1 VM was contributing the most to this section here. But then there's a lot of other VMs too that were active at this time and contributing to that particular peak. So you can also scroll back. We maintain about 7 days of history, and you can scroll back, or if you double click on the bottom bar here, you are presented with the 7-day history of what was happening on that data store. And you can split the screen here. So now what you can do is you can also compare the other metrics to get an idea of what was happening as if you were troubleshooting.
Yeah, you can do some correlation.
Right, right. And so here, for example, you're seeing flash usage versus the IOPS in the system. And you can see that this particular section here shows a lot of disk activity. So this, by the way, corresponds to when we do backups of this particular appliance. So we're reading everything on the appliance, all the way from everything on disk. Now let's go back to the dashboard. And what I've explained to you right now is the left-hand section of the dashboard, which gives you an overall view of the data store and also lets you know how much headroom is available. The right-hand section of the dashboard is mostly used for troubleshooting and gives you a quick idea of VMs that are operating out of the norm. So if you're a VM administrator, you typically know your fastest growing VMs or your most performant VMs. These two lists here show you VMs that are, for example, the space changers list will show you VMs that are growing faster or shrinking
Over the last 7 days.
Over the last 7 days, right. The performance changes list will show you VMs that are using more performance or less performance than they normally. Let's dig a little deeper, right? So let's say you are a system administrator or VM administrator coming in. You have a user that's not happy with their application, for example, or their VM, and you wanted to troubleshoot that. A couple of ways of doing that, right? So you could look at the list of VMs here, and if the VM is listed here, then there would be an indication that something's unusual and it's not operating the way it does. So you would click on it and it would drill down into that VM. Or you could click on the Find VM menu. Now you're presented with a list of VMs.
And you can sort every one of these columns.
Correct. So let's let's do that. Let's sort by IOPS and look at a VM that's contributing the most IOPS to this system right now. So this is one of our test VMs. It's contributing 4,700 IOPS right now. It's one of our test VMs. It's continuous pounding the system, running a variety of stress tests on the system, and it runs 24/7. If you double-clicked on that VM, you're presented with the same metrics that you saw earlier on a data store level, but now you're looking at it from a VM at a VM granularity. Again, we keep 7 days of history, so you can slide back and see what was happening to this VM over the last 7 days, or double-click and get the entire 7-day history. You can also split screen it, and you can compare and correlate the other metrics along the way. So what now you're looking at it from a VM perspective. If you click on the virtual disk tab, you will now see a list of virtual disks that are provisioned for this VM. So in this case, this VM has 7 virtual disks. As you can see here, there's 6 data disks and there's 1 swap disk. And if you click on any of the vDisks, you can see the same metrics that you had seen earlier, now at a vDisk granularity. And you could compare, correlate different metrics for each vDisk, or you could even select multiple vDisks and correlate metrics across vDisks. Right? So again, what you're seeing is key metrics at a VM or a vDisk granularity.
And that's just really, that is the foundational unit within our system.
Correct. Say you're a VM administrator, you came in, and there's 2 ways, right? You have a user that is complaining or an application that is misbehaving, and you want to quickly address the issue. There's one quick way of doing that here, and that is what we refer to as pinning. So you could pin a VM or you could pin a vDisk to flash. In that case, all the IOs for that VM or that vdisk will be serviced out of flash. Now, that's going to cost you more on the performance fuel gauge, so you would essentially be using up a lot more of your performance reserves. But it's a way out and a quick way to address a problem. As far as snapshots, again, you can take snapshots at a VM granularity. It's very simple. You would just select the VM and click on the Take Snapshot list here. And snapshots get taken very quickly, very fast, and then they're available in the snapshot tab, and you can use them as you would like to. So that in a nutshell is the Tintri appliance is all about. That's a quick overview.
Great. Thank you, Pratik.